Have you been wondering how organisations around the world are solving plastic pollution? Or whether our individual actions are making any difference? Or even how to get something going yourself? Tune in for conversations with me, Nat, founder of City to Sea, and my inspirational guests from around the world. Welcome back to Nat's Chat, and welcome to Dan Dicker, who's the founder and CEO of Circular & Co. They're an award-winning eco-design company based in North Cornwall, not North Devon, as I incorrectly thought this morning. So today we're going to be talking about plastic pollution from coffee cups, coming out of lockdown, and how the future is circular. Welcome, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks very much.
That's all right. Good to have you here. And I think very timely to have you here as well. So City to Sea's audience and our viewers might know of Circular & Co. because of the fabulous refill cup that we work with you on. So your cup is the world's first 100% leak proof, which I'm very happy about, reusable coffee cup made from waste from single-use cups. So that's the context in which people might know of Circular & Co. But I'm really interested, before we kind of dive into coffee cups and waste and plastics, just to hear a little bit about your founder's journey. I like talking about the business side of plastics as well, and talking to other founders. So how did you get going with this? Because the short walk's been going for quite some time, hasn't it?
It has, yeah, nearly 18 years. And interesting, I used to work, I'm a product designer by trade, and I was working for Dyson, and Dyson were kind of stuck landlocked near Swindon, Malmesbury, little village called Malmesbury that's dominated by Dyson. And I desperately wanted to live by the sea. So hence the name of Short Walk. So when we set the company up, or I set the company up, and we we're trying to think of a name, it was like, well, actually, it's all about being a short walk from the sea. So that's what we call it, because that was sort of my own personal mission back then.
And how far is your walk from the sea now then?
Do you know what? I'm really tough to say. We're about 300 yards from the coastal path on the north coast near St Agnes. So it's beautiful.
You really did it.
Really, yeah, we did it. You know, which has been great. And every day we make a point of getting out and walking the coastal path.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. You know, you only need 20 minutes just to clear your head and have a look at the sea.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Ponder life as you look over the ocean, and then go back to work again.
Yeah, we used to have an office pre-COVID on the harbour side in Bristol, and it wasn't quite the ocean, it wasn't quite the sea, but you did get the sort of sparkling water, harbour, seagulls, boats. So it did help us sort of having outdoor meetings. But I'm really impressed that you actually managed to get 300 yards away from the coast.
I know, and it's been quite a challenge, because we've ended up in quite a quirky old building. It's an airfield, World War II airfield, and it's one of the sort of outbuildings of that. So it's very sort of Cornish, I'd call it. So it's quirky but lovely, very exposed in the winter. You know, it's always a howling gale and horizontal rain, and you normally get a delivery just as horizontal rain arrives. And yeah. So it's quirky, put it that way. But we love it. We're desperate to try and stay here. We're kind of outgrowing it, but everyone wants to try and stay.
So you're a design company. So that was a Short Walk was started off as a design company and still is a design company, and Circular & Co. embodies your product range. When did you get into the circular economy, and what does it mean to you?
Well, right from day dot, actually, because when I left Dyson, it was just a personal decision to think, well, actually, the products we're going to design and manufacture, we desperately want them to be out of recycled or waste materials. I knew back even 18 years ago when I was at Dyson, it could be done technically, and I was a bit frustrated they weren't doing it, if I was honest. And I think when you leave and set up your own business, you need pillars to work to, and something unique and a goal, you know. And I think I really believe, from a creative perspective, the best way to be creative is actually set yourself some constraints, and that's when the real creative juices flow. So it was more out of a personal decision, saying, look, we think we can do better with regard to what products are made from. So we've been actually circular and circular designers for 18 years. So we were kind of a bit of ahead of our time. And I have to say, we've only really rebranded to Circular & Co. Once we felt that the kind of like the world was catching up and it actually had become a thing. And we were like, actually, we need to start shouting louder about what we've been doing. And the best way to do that is just to completely change our name. And you know, we didn't change our outlook. We just changed our name to sort of really highlight that we feel circular design and the circular economy is the future, is the way things are going to move, especially from an industry perspective. And I think I'll touch on a bit later, but from a consumer perspective, it's a bit slow still. And I think there's a big wave about to happen where consumers get far more engaged about the circular economy and living a circular lifestyle. To you or I, or if we chatted to you know an average person in the street, they probably wouldn't know what the circular economy meant. When actually it's going to be an incredibly powerful tool that everyone will start to follow over the next 5-10 years. So we just wanted to be a part of that and shout louder about it, because we do believe it's a really positive solution to some of our big problems.
So just to sum it up for people who are maybe watching who don't know what the circular economy is, it's about extending the life of our resources, isn't it? And so that at the end of its life it becomes something else, so it doesn't just get sort of downcycled and end up as waste, but it goes back into the system.
That's correct. And the key is avoiding the downcycling, because a lot of people get confused between the circular economy and recycling. They're like, well, isn't it just recycling? You know, you're trying to extend the use of resources by recycling them again. And it's like, well, no. The critical difference between the circular economy and recycling, because they're often confused, is the increase in value. So every time we look to reuse material or reuse a product and turn it back into something else, you're trying to increase and add value each time. And that's what keeps it then sustainable economically. So that's why we call it, you know, a circular economy, because it's built around the economics of being sustainable. If you downgrade every time, then obviously it's harder to, just one quick example, I think the circular cup is a good example of that, where we've used single-use paper cups and made it from single-use paper cups, but we're increasing the value of that cup because it's going into a higher value item. So in real terms, if you're a recycling company looking to collect cups, you know, it traditionally 3 years ago, you would have got £75 a tonne for those cups. So it wasn't really worth your while. Whereas if you turn it then into a circular cup, we can pay per tonne £1,200 for that same material. So you're massively increasing the value of that material. So that's a really good example of how the circular economy and circular design works to increase the value of waste, and therefore makes it economic to start processing and collecting.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear, and really inspiring as well, and definitely helps me understand it better. So and the circular cups, for example, can actually then be recycled again and turned back into cups again. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the principles of circular design, we've got 3 pillars. We call it the 100-10-100 kind of rule. So when we're designing a product, you know, not just for us, but for any company we design for, we try to hit 100% recycled content, at least 10 years use, and then 100% recyclable. Now that's an aspiration a lot of the times, because a lot of times we don't hit it. You know, we're quite open and honest about not getting there with some products, but the point is that's what we're trying to aim for. And it is a challenge, because as an industry, it's still quite hard to do that. It's hard to implement and get hold of recycled materials. It's then hard to recycle a product at the end of its life, because the infrastructure we've got isn't still the best to support it. So it's challenging, but the point is we've got to try and get to that position, the 100-10-100.
Yeah. It's a really, really strong vision, and it's absolutely what we need going forward on a planet with a growing population and finite resources. You know, we have to get to that place. So let's drill down into coffee cups. So I think we're looking at like around 7 million a day, probably pre-COVID, that the UK was getting through, around 2.5 billion coffee cups thrown away each year just in the UK, which is a mind mind-boggling statistic of that much waste. Obviously, they are hard to recycle, but you found a way of turning them into a product, as you said, increasing the value of that product. What's happening at industry level apart from so in terms of recycling coffee cups and maybe even legislation around coffee cups?
Well, interestingly, when we originally designed the circular cup, as I mentioned, there was the price per ton of collecting cups was so low that no one was really doing it. So that was half the problem. Although lots of cups weren't being recycled, it was generally because there was one, they were hard to recycle because of the plastic inner lining, but nevertheless they were recyclable. But two, there was just no money in it. So if you, as I say, if you increase the value of that sort of low commodity, then companies can start recycling. So now I think 3 years ago there were 1 or 2 companies kind of reluctantly recycling them, and then now there's, I think on the last count, 18 in the UK. So the cup collection and recycling side has massively improved. And that's not just been because of Circular Cup and the fact that we've increased the value. There's been other incentives as well. Some of the bigger sort of coffee brands that we help to be more circular, they've put incentives onto the market and put an increase. I think Costa introduced a levy on cups. So every ton that was collected through Costa, they added, I think, £75 to the value of that. So that helped improve matters as well. So more recycling firms started to take on coffee cup recycling. So if you move on 3 years to where we are now, the collection and recycling side is a lot better than it was. And then of course, we're not just downgrading those cups into, typically kind of egg boxes and toilet roll holders, the inners of toilet rolls. We're looking to, come up with other ways to increase the value of them. So that's moved a lot in 3 years and become a lot more circular, and there's a lot more value in that material now. And when you think about it, you're taking, if you could design it into any product, but if we use Circular Cup as an example, you're taking a cup that once lasted 10 minutes and then was potentially thrown away into a cup that lasts 10 years. And then that cup, as you said, can get recycled back into another cup time and time again. So that one paper cup that had all that value and resource and energy put into it that was then thrown away after 10 minutes is going to last, quite literally 100 years. So that's the beauty of that model. And then with regard to, as I touched on, we do design, we design our own products and manufacture them and export them sort of around the world, but we also, at least 50% of our business is designing circular products for other people and other brands. And we do a lot of work with some of the big coffee brands. And so we get quite an insight into how generally the coffee market is going and how reusables are going and how they're being implemented within the bigger brands sort of globally. And there's some really, really positive news coming from that side as well, where they're looking to adopt a more reusable culture. We sit on, or we chair a body, a group set up by one of the big multinationals on literally that. How can they implement reusables per se across the whole of their platform? And that's not necessarily just consumer facing reusables, but just reusables within their whole infrastructure. Where are the single use elements and how can we, so the very fact that big companies like that are setting up groups like that, I think is really massively positive, hugely positive when you think about it. And they're doing some really useful things this year. I think this year particularly, as we all move forward, touch wood, I think there's going to be some quite big incentives around reusables. They're also looking at the potential of take-back schemes, and I know there's a couple of pilots happening sort of towards the middle part of the year and the latter part of the year around reusable take-back models, which I think, that could have a big effect. And if anything, it's going to help highlight the fact that, there's a wider reuse adoption out there. And even if you're not particularly involved in sort of going into a restaurant, having a coffee, paying whatever it is, £1 for your take back cup, and then when you bring that cup back, you get your £1 back. and then that cup will then be cleaned and hygienically washed, ready for use again. And I think if anything, it's just going to highlight to people about this culture of reuse in areas that people probably aren't thinking about yet. I think there's been great adoption of reuse. I don't know if you remember a Hubbub report probably a year ago where they highlighted, I think 2/3 of the public did actually own a reusable, which is hugely positive. But the other sad data they put forward is only 1/6 of them were actually using it.
Yeah.
So 2/3 owned it, but only 1/6 used it.
Well, I think, and that's what we've seen, that sort of actually, carrots don't work as well as sticks in terms of incentives, don't work as well as actually levies and charges at the point of sale. We ran a petition with City to See for a tax on takeaway coffee cups, I think back in 2018, and had 250,000 people sign it. And there was definitely some movement with Welsh government in adopting that, but the UK government, then everything got sort of sucked up into Brexit, and teams that were working on that all got sort of disbanded and put onto Brexit. So I think there may be some movement in that as well through the Environment Bill and coming forward. But it's really good. It's really good to hear that sort of more deep industry focused push and sort of tide that's moving towards reusables. And like you say, we've had the pioneering companies like Boston Tea Party in Bristol, who just completely got rid of disposable coffee cups, and it's a very brave move. And I think we're seeing more of that infrastructure, like you say, the take back system, the cup drop off points. So fingers crossed. But obviously we've seen a big setback this year, last year with COVID and reusables, and we saw coffee chains reversing their policies on reusables and implementing a ban on reusables. And we worked quite hard forming an industry task force to address that and get our petition going of get reusables back on the menu. So we did manage to get Pret and Costa and Starbucks to reverse that ban, but still I think there's a lot of confusion out there of people still not knowing if it's safe, although there was a study out last June, I think it was like 120 epidemiologists and experts concluded that reusables didn't pose a threat to public during the pandemic. And we launched our contactless coffee campaign. But, despite the fact that we responded proactively, the on-the-go plastics movement has had a bit of a setback. And how have you experienced that yourself with Circular & Co?
I think from our perspective, in terms of how COVID has affected our business, it has been quite hard. I think generally the on the go is obviously taking a hit, and people aren't thinking or weren't thinking about that side of things. And we're probably 50% down overall in the reusable side of things. But I think there's also been some positives. I think one really interesting aspect, I was talking to one of the bigger, I can't remember the exact brand, but one of the bigger coffee brands in the UK, and they were saying that actually one of the main drivers, the two drivers, which is interesting about why they started to allow reusables back during a COVID period, was the public asked for it. So they put pressure. So they were thinking, do you know what? From a hygiene perspective, we'll keep the ban on reusables. It's potentially putting our staff in danger. It's potentially putting individuals in danger. And actually, because of the pressure from the end consumer, the public, saying actually we really want it back, they opened it back up. And then of course it was the work that you guys were doing. So it's quite funny because we work with these kind of people. We see it having an effect, and we're kind of party to conversations where they're saying, there's that kind of, I was going to say pressure put on them. I don't think it's pressure, it's just a demand. The other aspect that they did say is people were asking for reusables to come back in was a financial aspect as well. I think people have got used to their 25p off a cup and quite like that, and for that to be taken away was quite a wrench for people. So again, that was another area that they were keen to get that back. So it's been great that during COVID, the main reasons for for reusables coming back in and being taken back is being driven by demand and consumers.
Yay.
Rather than sort of within industry, which is a really big win. And I think that's a great insight as to how, you know, it's going to move as we hopefully come out of COVID. I think it's going to be driven by people wanting to get back into that culture. But it's still, you know, it's still, what are we at now? I think about 7%. It used to be between 3 and 4% of coffee, you know, coffees drunk were in a reusable. It effectively doubled in a short space of time, which was brilliant. You know, superb, but it still fell at relatively low. So I think there's a lot to be done, but it's all moving in the right direction. COVID has definitely sort of put a little bit of a pause on it, but I think moving forward, it's almost highlighted. And I don't know about you, but the whole green agenda has not in any way gone away during COVID. If anything, it's sort of got noisier and noisier. And you can feel this sort of tension. And I think once sort of the COVID news we're not being dominated by COVID news. There's this sort of this bubbling coiled spring to be released that is the environment that's going to really going to, you know, take off in the next couple of months. I think everyone can feel it coming.
I think so too. Really
positive.
Yeah, and we're in the UN decade of ecosystem restoration now, and I think very much the focus does seem to be moving that way finally. So just sort of before we wrap up, any kind of looking to the future, we've touched on a few projects and initiatives that you're feeling positive about. Is there anything else sort of around your vision for a circular world that you're feeling optimistic about?
Yeah, I think I do. One, the sort of natural bounce back, as we touched on. I think you know, without sounding too boring, but legislation is all heading in the right direction and forcing bigger companies, especially, to sort of react. So there's great moves there, and I think from a consumer perspective, that's what really excites us. You know, that's kind of why we changed our brand to Circular & Co, because we want to shout about the need for everyone to become more circular. But first of all, they need to understand what that is. And then we need to put things in place to allow people to do it. It's one thing trying to inspire people to be circular, but they need the things in place to be able to do it. So there's lots to be done, but I think it's really exciting. I think we live in a massively exciting time at the moment where the world woke up to certain things that are fundamental about how we live. And we're going to be the ones to live through that progression, but not just on a, you know, I think from a professional and individual level. From a professional perspective, it's really exciting being a product designer at the moment, because it's on us to put products onto the market that are circular, are thought about. You know, there's a real danger that we switch to reusables, which is brilliant, but then those reusables should not add to the problem. You know, they need to be recyclable. They need to be made from waste. They need to be designed with longevity in mind. So that, I think we've got to keep that in mind. Let's not cause a second wave of problems where we're inundated with reusables that actually you can only use once. So let's be careful there. But how exciting is that? You know, that's a great remit as a designer to try and rectify that problem and put onto the market things that are going to naturally be circular, so that when the consumer and us as people buy them, you're naturally being circular anyway. You're buying into it without almost realizing it. But then the second wave is trying to put this message out there to people that actually, you know, think and be circular. And the way we're going to view products and resources and waste is going to change dramatically in the next 10 to 20 years. And it's not just about electric cars and eating less meat. You know, it's going to be about how we interact with goods and products and services and resources, and, you know, and think twice about before you buy. You know, how much do I consume? Do I really need that? And if I do really need it, you know, can I buy a higher quality, less impact kind of product? So it's that mind shift for people. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's actually quite exciting when you get into it, and I'm just looking forward to it, because I do think it's coming, and I think people will really engage with it, and I think the way we view resource is going to drastically change, and I don't think we will just throw things away regardless.
Yeah,
I think
well,
would be quite
about
shrewd and
time
smart.
too. It's sort of like we're
Yeah,
just kind of
exactly.
leaving. I think maybe like humans love a deadline. I know personally I love a deadline, and now it's sort of like we've
Yeah,
known about this stuff for, 30, 40 years. You've been working on it for nearly 20, and it's finally like
yeah,
now it's just like it has to happen now. It's like we're finally like, oh, okay, right, no, we should maybe do something about it now. But I
yeah.
think it's just in the nick of
Brilliant.
time, isn't it? We've got a small window, and so yes, I'm glad to hear this is from your side as well in terms of product design. You're seeing this move and the sense of urgency around it in the industry as well.
Massively, massively. It's going to be
Good.
really exciting.
Good. Well, Dan, it's been great talking to you. I think for our viewers, some of the things that people can do, obviously, if you're coming up against shops and cafes that aren't accepting reusables at the moment, and you would like to persuade them to accept reusables again safely, then you can show them the contactless coffee video from City to Sea. That's across our channels. And sign the petition as well. So we've got a Get Reusables Back on the Menu petition. So if you're watching and you haven't signed that petition, there are still some chains that haven't agreed to accept reusables. So let's keep that pressure up, because as Dan says, it works. We know it works.
It does. It does. We all just need to adopt and get used to it. It's becoming a habit. Once it's a habit, it's like going on a diet, isn't it? You can try all these fads, but until you actually change your habits,
Yeah,
nothing changes. So it's that just
exactly.
viewing it as a habit change. And
Yeah.
once you get into reusable, it's actually really rewarding. You just walk around, you walk around town thinking, right, today I am just going to, every coffee, every drink, every water I have is going to be in my reusable. And I'm
Yeah,
going to ask
exactly.
for it. And I'm not going to be shy about asking for it. I'm going to demand it, because actually they all give you it. Everyone gives you it. I've never had, I don't know about yourself, Natalie, but I've never had anyone, no cafe has ever said, no, I won't refill your water bottle, or you can't,
Yeah.
take a reusable. And I think in normal times, and I think we've got this COVID challenge, but it will come in the next couple of months. I think we'll all be back there, which is going to be brilliant.
Yeah. Exactly. Good. Well, good to be on the journey with you, Dan, and thanks for your support
And
of
yourselves.
the refill campaign. And so, yeah, thanks for joining me on Nat's Chats.
It was a pleasure, and thanks for your support for Refill. We're really proud to be part of it, and we hope we can help contribute.
Amazing. Thank you.
That's okay. Thanks, Natalie.
You've been listening to Nat's Chats. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.